Hello and welcome to the Bridge Burners Book Club, where together we read, discuss, criticize, and get excited about all things fantasy. I'm your host, Sean, and with me is my co-host, Tyler.
That's me.
And our co-host, Ben.
Oh no! You trusted a Terran ferryman!
We're excited to have you along with us each week as we take a journey together through the books we love. I think there was a line dissing Ken Bowie or like bringing him up in these chapters.
I underline him wherever I see him, so he's probably in here somewhere.
And like, if we do this for like 5 seasons, like I am going to be scraping the barrel so hard on Ken Bowie-isms, made up or real.
Yeah.
Yeah, we may have to find a different persona for you per book.
You don't have to be Ken Bowie or Ben Bowie when you do the intro. It's not required. Nobody's holding you to it.
Yeah, I just say that's me. But it's funnier that I say that's me and you do something ridiculous. So I'm not complaining. It's a good bit.
I don't want the spoilers, but I'm going to ask anyways. I think at some point, if I remember reading something right, there is a portion of at least one of the books where some characters return to Two Rivers, something like that.
Yeah, they make it back eventually.
Yeah, I would imagine Ken Bowie's there, and he's probably like, I've turned my whole life around. I've switched from thatch to slate, and now I trust women and tarried fairy people or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I bet the new wisdom really leads like a revolution in town, and everyone's just way nicer and just like, what if she's just like super sweet and like no one calls each other woolheads when they go back?
They're all sitting crisscross applesauce on the village green, passing the sharing ball around.
I'm gonna write the fanfic where Rand comes back to Two Rivers and Ken Bowie is now Jen Bowie and has had a coming out and is
he's now the wisdom.
Yeah,
Jen Bowie is part of the women's circle and leading that portion of things. A real girl boss.
God, that'd be beautiful. Yeah, okay, write it.
We're recording this on 10/24, so we're a week away from Halloween, which it's Halloween. I'm an adult. I know a lot of people love it a lot, but I don't get like crazy about it, but I still enjoy kind of watching some horror movies and things like that around this time. Has anybody checked out the Fall of the House of Usher, like the Netflix show that they made?
Keep getting ads for it, but I have not seen it, no.
I watched part of the first episode and kind of lost interest, but don't let that be an indictment. It's just I'm not necessarily a horror person. I do like Edgar Allan Poe, though.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's like uses the Fall of the House of Usher as like a frame to tell sort of some adaptations or playing off of different story beats from different Edgar Allan Poe stuff in each of these individual stories within that frame of that one main one. And then, it's kind of just like a person. These shit people die. One of them dies every week or every episode. And, it's kind of fun, but it reminded me that the guy that directed that also did, did you guys ever see Midnight Mass?
Mm-mm.
No, I didn't see that one.
I would highly recommend that. That's like one of my favorite shows I've seen in a long time that just came out like maybe a year or two ago. And I won't spoil anything about it. And it is horror in some ways, but it's also like, it's got some cool supernatural elements, but mostly it's character-based long discussions about interesting things. And that's really cool, super good. And then also, to bring it even further back, that guy also he did the movie that is the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, with Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I did watch that.
Mike Flanagan is his name. I actually liked that movie quite a bit. Have you guys read The Shining book? I have not read the book.
Yes, it's great and terrifying.
Yes, I have read The Shining book. It's good.
And Dr. Sleep, I think, is that also a book?
I don't think so. Actually, I'm not sure. Given like how quickly Stephen King can churn something out, especially in the last 20 years.
It is a novel in 2013. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think we were both getting out of our Stephen King phases when this happened, but yeah.
Yeah.
I know the movie Dr. Sleep is it's like a sequel to the movie The Shining, because it actually like tries to make the characters look like the characters and when it shows flashbacks and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a strange but interesting movie. There's so many Stephen King adaptations out there, and I don't like most of them, but I enjoyed that one. Okay.
The movie podcast I listened to was reviewing the Mist black and white version.
Oh,
wow.
Which I would be really interested in seeing that, and just piqued my interest. I just really need to rewatch that movie. I've been trying to get Kayla to do it, but she likes some horror, but she's an Ari Aster, more artsy. I don't know. I'm actually a bigger chicken for horror than she is, and The Mist is more of a thriller sci-fi, I guess.
Yeah, but I don't know. If she likes those kind of movies, I could see how she might actually like The Mist too, because it's like most of it, it's the tension and the humans getting at each other in these horrible ways that is the horror of it. There's the stuff going on out in the mist that pops up every now and then that drives the tension of it all that leads to these other issues. But it's like, really, it's this isolation in a very small space with crazy people that leads to what's really fucked up about it.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, that's a classic Stephen King move in like The Stand. Anything where there's like religious leaders or bullies, which that was another good point that I think that podcast brought up, or I was listening, I don't know where else it would have come up, but it's called We'll See You in Hell is the podcast, just to plug it. They mentioned how no one writes bullies like Stephen King.
Yeah.
One of the guys put it like, you don't just feel like you're being bullied. You feel like the bully is going to kill that person. They hate them so much.
Yeah, he definitely writes a good character, at least sometimes. I think I've seen some clips and I've heard that people like the black and white version. That would definitely be probably up my alley. So maybe I'll check it out this spooky season. And speaking of spooky seasons, I felt like we got these chapters at just the right time because there's some spooky stuff happening in them.
These are good ones.
Oh, it definitely is. I know this is some action-packed fun. I like these chapters.
Before we get into them, can I just mention I just saw a trailer for a horror movie called Thanksgiving. Apparently it's directed by Eli Roth.
Oh, yeah.
I keep seeing this on my Twitter feed. What is it? It looks so weird.
It just shows like the killer and you just see a shadow of a pilgrim's hat.
Yeah.
Yep. And an axe.
And then like someone's like opens a door and a corn on the cob rolls out. The most benign tropes of a holiday used to create a horror story. But I guess it's Eli Roth, so it could be good and somewhat satirical, but I almost texted you guys the trailer. I can't believe this shit is happening.
He's got some of really terrible movies also, though, but was that one like The Green Inferno or something? It's like a cannibal movie with some people in South America, and it's got an infamous diarrhea scene. It's really bad.
Nice.
That movie actually came out of back when the Grindhouse movie came out 15 years ago or some shit. I remember I saw it in the theater, and I think they might have put it on some of the DVDs, but there were a few trailers in between the two movies, like Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof and Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror. And then in between them, there were some fake trailers for movies. And one of them was Thanksgiving or something like that Eli Roth made.
Okay. It's ringing a bell.
There's a great one I remember that was just called Don't. And the trailer had the guy's voice, and he's just like, if you're thinking about going outside, don't.
Someone's going to be suffocated with mashed potato.
Yeah.
That's the first kill that comes to mind.
Somebody's going to be like trussed up like a turkey and cooked at some point.
They could be turduckened.
Oh. It's like the human centipede, but the turducken.
Boom! Turduckened!
Oh my God. I kind of want to see that, but ooh.
The living turducken. Ugh.
I also am horrified just imagining it.
Here's my spooky media thing. I've been looking at a new RPG, like a tabletop RPG called Teeth.
It's not related to the movie Teeth, is it?
No, it's not. It's like set in 1780s England, but like weird horror, kind of like, Dracula and Frankenstein style. But you're playing as like monster killers as in a group. And there's a bunch of different little, there's a giant game that can be broken out into like 20 different little sub games that you play, but you have your hunter that you keep the whole time and you have secrets that you're supposed to do. But the art for the game is really super cool. So
yeah, I like the art.
It's on itch.io. And I was actually Night of the Hogmen is like a sub game that I was actually thinking of trying to run this year if I could actually get my shit together. But now it's the 24th of the month, so it's probably not going to happen.
It's never too late for spooky season. I mean, by the time this episode comes out, it'll be a couple days after. So yeah.
I know Halloween will be over.
All right. Well, should we get into the chapters?
Let's do it.
Chapter 19, Shadows Waiting. As evening closes in, the party makes their way through the dead city of Shadar Logoth, eventually finding shelter for the night in a half-ruined building. Matt, Perrin, and Rand are assigned the duty of stabling horses in a back room, where they eventually decide to make a quiet escape in the hopes of using the remaining daylight to explore the city on their own. Led by Matt's insistent desire to find an ancient treasure out in the ruins, the boys explore palaces and temples with little luck until a voice hails them from the entrance to an underground passageway. The man introduces himself as Mordrith, a treasure hunter. Without giving it a second thought, Matt follows Mordrith, who promises a hoard of treasure too large to carry himself. Fear grips the boys as they make their way further into the darkness until they finally reach a vast chamber filled with gold, gems, and artifacts. Rand notices that Mordrith casts no shadow in the torchlight, leading the strange man to begin a supernatural attack when questioned. Fleeing the chamber, the group finds their way into the streets and eventually back to the rest of the group, feeling as if they are watched by the shadows with every step. Moiraine chastises the boys, explaining that Mordrith was an outsider to Eredal who became an advisor to the king, setting the city down the path to ruin. The party sleeps while waiting for Lan, who was sent to find the boys. They depart immediately when he does return, bringing news that Trollocs and Myrddraal have entered Shadar Logoth. Ooh, there's a lot that happens.
I know, it's action-packed. I love it.
These chapters are thick, boys. That's for sure.
I like at the very beginning how it says tumbled walls, spilled fans of brick and stone into the streets. That visual of fans of brick, I guess that, you can see how like the splatter pattern, the forensic details of how these things fell out.
Yeah, it's not just like piles of crumbled brick, but you kind of just show that the word fan makes you think of how the crumbling actually happened, which is good.
Well, it's because the bottom buckles first and the top kind of retains more of a, I don't know. Why am I explaining this? You know why, but it's a great description.
Yeah, but then right after that, it's just talking about how big the city is. And I like that too.
There's some really good descriptions.
One of the funny things about like the first section is Nynaeve is like, I think right in front of Moiraine's like, I may not like her, but I have to help anyone that needs my help.
She's like, right there. She's right in front of her.
She's not saying it. It's like a weird like mixture of passive aggressivism and just like aggressive aggressivism.
I mean, it's basically the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm or whatever.
Yeah, I hate you. But she's not saying it to Moiraine. She's just saying it to, I think, Perrin. No, she's saying to Lan.
We'll get into Nynaeve's head for a little bit in the coming chapter here, but she's definitely thinking about that kind of stuff constantly. Like, man, I hate all these people, but I have to do this. And she's very conflicted at this point in time.
And I like one thing that she does do here is she calls Lan Lord of the Seven Towers kind of in a mocking way.
Yeah, she doesn't even know what it means, but she's like, whatever, Lord of the Seven Towers.
Foxtail Marison. She always has different things that she's prescribing, and I don't even know what some of these words are.
Oh, I know. Every now and then I look up the herbs and things that she's mentioning because I want to know if she's referring to something real, because Robert Jordan will throw in real things from nature amongst the fake ones all the time. And you don't know whether that was like the old folk name for some herb that we know now or not.
Yeah, and he says foxtail, but foxtail is that really shitty grass that like dogs get stuck in their nose. I don't think there's any medicinal value to that shit.
I do like how they're looking around the city as they enter it, and Rand just thinks, and I thought Baerlon was a city. Burn me, but Tom must have been laughing up his sleeve. Moiraine and Lan, too. It's like, yeah, motherfucker, like, you didn't notice that they were laughing at you the entire time? Like, come on. They've all been holding back from completely making fun of you kids the entire time as you go to these new places.
This provincial naivete is definitely charming, but I'm really looking forward to when like we get to the point that Robert Jordan just put this behind us and just move on from that.
Yeah, they become people of the world.
Yeah, we're about almost 300 pages into this book, and it's still going on. It's good. I mean, he's still building character.
They're definitely going to do it when they reach the city, like the actual cities, and it's definitely going to keep happening in Tar Valon. And so, yeah, I think, they're never going to be the cosmopolitan city boys.
Well, just like Nynaeve, she says in this block of chapters, like, she didn't notice the splendor of Baerlon because she was so worried about finding Egwene. They fought Trollocs now like 3 times, and they're still, the the most important thing that's happening in their world is the size of the cities and buildings that they're seeing, which makes sense. But also when you like, I'm sure in like war in, Iraq, Vietnam, etc., all these country boys from Ascot, Arkansas are going to war, and they've seen like 50 people in their entire life. Once you start shooting at people and get shot at, like all that stuff is kind of irrelevant.
They haven't really picked up that much trauma yet from what I've seen, but maybe after they have their little encounter with creepy Mordreth, they'll get some.
But it seems like they should be, like, they've all gone through some pretty traumatic stuff, and they seem to just be kind of like shrugging it off, and like
they've killed things.
Egwene's even like making light of Trollocs like in that same night. They're not really grappling with these things that are happening to them.
Yeah.
Robert Jordan's trying to prolong their innocence longer than it should be prolonged, I think.
Yeah.
It works, but it's kind of annoying.
I can't see, like, realistically, like, we're skipping ahead a little bit, but them leaving this place and just going out on their own to explore seems like a really dumb fucking move. If you think like Trollocs are after you, even if Moiraine said, okay, hey, Trollocs won't follow us here, like, just stay with the group, or like say, hey, we're going over here to pee or something. Like, yeah, I don't know. They don't seem to be taking this all very seriously for the fact of like what's been happening to them.
Rand, Mat, and Perrin get so fucking stupid, especially Mat in these chapters. But before we quite get there, I do like, speaking of all this, how Lan tells them as they get to this dilapidated building that has like the first floor kind of intact. And he's like, okay, go to the back, and you boys and Tom, you get the horses set up back there. And he's like, move, farm boys. This isn't the village green. He knows exactly who they are.
And I like that Perrin just gets right to work. Like, oh, yeah, he takes everyone's horse, and everyone, like, the girls just hand them their reins and walk in. Like, what are they supposed to be doing now? Yeah, it's funny that they're the only ones explicitly given a job here.
Well, we will never know what they did after that, because they just kind of sneak out.
These boys just piece the fuck out. I mean, it is literally the first opportunity. They haven't been chased, and they just literally leave.
Let's find a good chase.
It does sort of make sense, because they really do. That's their actual chance. Like, after that, they're going to be pretty much watched the entire time, and they've just kind of been overlooked. It's like, oh, go back in here. And Tom left the room, and it's just the three boys there. And Matt's like, come on, we got to go explore this town. I could see how these young boys would do that, but at the same time, like, in the situation that they're in, like we were just talking about how they seem to be lacking trauma, you would think that they would be a little more afraid at this point of just going out there on their own. And Rand even gets a little bit, once he gets split up from the rest of the group later on, as they're trying to flee the city, he sort of goes back to being like, Moiraine, she's just as bad as everything else. And the Trollocs are only a little bit worse than Moiraine. And it's like, Jesus, man, when are you going to learn your fucking lesson? But yeah, they get out into the city, and they basically start exploring these old buildings and find that almost everything is falling apart.
And Matt's being weird here. Like, the first thing I noticed is, like, as soon as he gets out, he says, free, free, and he's laughing.
Yeah.
So it seems very strange to me. Did he do this back in Barleon and we just didn't see?
Yeah, Matt, his trickster, like, persona is kind of, other than his little white cloak trick, he's been pretty benign this whole adventure.
There's definitely something that's working on him here. Yeah, for sure.
He does get kind of questioned on that, and he says that he's sort of thinking about the war cry thing and how that was weird, and it seems like he's in a weird mood from that, and that's sort of his excuse, but I don't know, it seems like something else is going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And when they do talk about that, though, it's like they talk about how Mat could be the descendant of one of the kings from back then or something like that.
Yeah, like Tom says something like when they're talking about the like reincarnation or whatever, and Tom's like, don't talk about that, that's stupid. The dead can be reborn or take a living body, and that's not something to speak of lightly. But yeah, I know you guys are probably just like old blood or something. That's way more normal. And it's just like Tom is always just like popping in with weird lore here and there, but there's never any like rhyme or reason to anything that he says.
He's like Clippy.
Hey, I hear you're having some trouble with the old blood of Manetheren.
Gen Z folks, I'm sorry, you won't get this.
Yeah, that's just for us oldsters.
Did you ever use Windows 95?
Yeah, it's no better today.
They wander through these buildings and they find that there's basically nothing left. All the paintings and tapestries are just brown and falling apart at the touch. Perrin tries to pick up a chair and it falls apart. And there's literally nothing going on until finally, I think Matt says, oh, let's go explore one of those towers we can probably see for miles. And they're like, we should get back. And then a voice comes out from behind them. And this weird, dirty old man from the corner is like...
Well, what I've noticed here is that the dude appears right after Matt says, they're all saying, like, hey, we should head back. And he's like, hey, there might be treasure here. And like, I feel like this is the first time we've heard anything about treasure or gold or riches or anything like that in this story. That's not what this story is about at all. But suddenly Matt's saying, oh, I want to find some treasure. And that's when the man appears in the shadows.
Ooh, someone say treasure?
Did someone say treasure?
Ding, 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 ding,
Yep.
ding, ding.
Yeah, he's like, those towers are falling apart. You don't want to go there, but I have a whole hoard of treasure down in my basement. Why don't you come look with me?
I'm Mordeth. I'm a treasure hunter.
Hey, sonny boys, hope you like to come down to my basement. Take a look at my treasures.
That's basically exactly what it is.
We're going to get sued now. Thank you, Ben. I like how Matt just does not fucking question it. Like, oh, yeah, guys, I told you there'd be treasure. Let's go. And just like runs after the guy. Like, no thought whatsoever in his dumb little head.
Yeah, this Mordrith character, as I was kind of saying before we started, I imagine him as a slightly thicker version of Peter Lorre, which, yeah, like, is also speaking to Gen Z. No one knows what that is, but you might have seen like a imitation of Peter Lorre in media. He's like a often imitated character, but just an actor that was in like Casablanca and stuff like that. But him being like, shelter for the night, you say, perhaps you will join me.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of got that weird voice, very, very unique. And just look it up and you'll probably know who I'm talking about.
Oh, here we go. I found the description of Mordeth when they finally kind of get in there to be talking. So they follow him down to these dark tunnels, and then suddenly he's like, oh, no, there's lights below. And then sure enough, they get to some place where there's some light. It describes him there as a sleek, somewhat overfed man with drooping eyelids that made him seem to be hiding behind something and staring. Interesting, bit kind of maybe weird description. He was short and completely bald, but he walked as if he was taller than any of them. And his clothes were strange. And then, yeah, we get a classic Robert Jordan fancy clothes description, which we haven't had too many of so far.
Yeah, he's got like matching red boots and cloak or something like that. And he's kind of completely out of place. Like Rand even notices when he's looking at him that like, that doesn't really look like what you would expect out of like a treasure hunter guy who supposedly has been underground for a long time because the light hurts his eyes.
Yep.
But Matt is immediately just like, oh, treasure. I've been looking for treasure. Let's not have any discussion at all or bring you back to meet any of our friends or anything. Let's just immediately follow you down to the treasure that you claim we just need to grab, and we'll walk it out to your horses or whatever.
Yeah, and this guy's like, oh, I really need 3 dudes to help me carry all this treasure, which is like, maybe why are you out here alone then?
Like if they were in Two Rivers and some guy was like, I just need like 3 people to follow me and go gather this treasure. Who wants to follow me?
These 3 would be the dumbasses that would do it.
Yeah, apparently, but you wouldn't think so if it was in that context. But I think it also, it sort of tries to sell it as Matt is the one that's just like, oh, yeah, let's go, treasure. And then the others are like, oh, well, I guess we have to follow Matt because we can't just leave him.
They do, and they kind of check their weapons and shit as they're going in. So I think that is trying to show that.
But still,
when they do get to the treasures, they get to the room and it's your classic like treasure trove piles of loot. And with a cry, Matt ran forward and fell to his knees in front of the piles. Sacks, he said breathlessly, pawing through the gold, which I just for some reason imagining like a dog digging between its legs at the beach. Just we need Sacks.
Yeah, his immediate thought is we need Sacks. They're getting their hands right into this treasure, and that's when Perrin lets it slip like, oh, Moiraine and Lan will understand what we did if we show them this. How can Moiraine and Lan, the people who seem to have unlimited funds, how are they going to deny that, we did the right thing here? And they get a response from Mordred from that where he's like, "You are not alone." And he gets real fucking creepy real quick. And Matt is just like barely even paying attention. He's like, "Oh yeah, Moiraine and Lan. And there's Nynaeve, Egwene, Tom, he's a Gleeman. We're heading to Tarvalon. Whatever. Let's get the treasure." Holy shit, dude.
Just all of them. Yeah. I don't think he's correctly identified their aliases at a single given point in this journey here.
I don't think that like the magic of this world or anything after this like really supports it, but it really seems that Matt is kind of glamored.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, yeah.
Maybe that is like they just don't really touch on it, and that's what Mordeth it's part of what he does, but it seems that Matt is glamored into drawing all of them into this treasure hunt.
Yeah, I do feel, at least in this first book, that it seems like, to me, that's kind of a weakness of Robert Jordan's writing in some of these moments, that I think he could have. You don't have to give like the explicit acknowledgement that that's what it was, but you can put in just like one line that vaguely gives you a hint, or at least something that you could construct a theory around it being that Matt has something acting on him that, you know, is influencing his actions and thoughts here, and it would make more sense. But I feel like you can fill that in your head just fine, like we're doing, but there needs to be something there to really make it feel intentional, because otherwise you're really only guessing.
Yeah. I think like any fantasy author that's getting into an epic book series experiences that, like Steven Erikson and Gardens of the Moon. Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies in the magic, and like you're just kind of feeling out your world and like kind of trying to define it, but you can't retcon that much stuff while you're, you know, working through the edits of like writing. And
so if you're like too decisive about stuff early on, then you won't be able to fix it later.
yeah, there's other things about like whether or not items can be magical. Like Moiraine says, they can't, you know, an inanimate object cannot be magical, but they can be imbued with magic, the true source.
Which seems pretty magic to me, but yeah, I understand it.
But will that hold through all of the books?
Yeah. Well, even in this next few chapters, there's a couple things that kind of call that into question. But no, I'm fine. Like, especially as a veteran, you know, fantasy reader at this point, like, it doesn't bother me too much. Like, as long as the writing is good and the characters are good and the story's good.
Well, and like I said, I don't ask much at all, but I would appreciate like one small sentence that doesn't even directly address it, that just sort of gives you that foundation to build on, that it could be that, but instead we're like literally filling in the gaps because there's nothing there to walk across. But
well, I think the real answer is that it's worse than, you know, a magical explanation. It's just like Robert Jordan's using Matt's personality to, you know, Deus Ex Machina the plot into this action.
Into a conflict that doesn't need to really happen. Yeah.
And that's, like I was saying, that's a weakness. But, you know, it's also, like we said, it's the first book. And as things get more decisive as it goes on, I assume that those sorts of questionable moments sort of become more firm.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of, I think, long-term storylines in this book about like what Matt's character is. And he's definitely an unusual person with an unpredictable nature. And this is maybe our first real glimpse of this other than small town prankster boy.
I mean, he wears fingerless gloves, so.
He does wear fingerless gloves. So, you know, what do you want? Yeah.
Matt's the Charlie Day. He's the wild card of the group.
Yeah. I cut the brakes.
Matt would be the one that cuts the brakes.
Back to the story here. Perrin goes and picks up a gold and jewel encrusted axe and can you imagine if somehow things had turned out differently, and for the rest of this story Perrin is carrying around just the gaudiest axe possible.
They get those items and, you know, they're holding this shit and they're like, oh, this is gonna be great. And that's when Mordeth has that moment where he's like, so you're not alone. I guess I'm gonna have to turn into a giant shadow creature and scare the shit out of you.
And that's when Rand realizes you don't have a shadow. Because this whole time he's been got the descriptions about him and we're like, something seemed weird, and here's some stuff about him, but that wasn't the weird thing, and here's some other stuff about him, but that's not the weird thing. And then finally Rand realizes what the weird thing is, and it's the lack of a shadow. And that makes Mat drop a goblet with a crash.
We get that moment where he sort of pulls a Moiraine from the last episode where we were talking about how she turned into a giant, sexy lady. And then instead we have this guy turn into some kind of, he turns into like the black smoke creature from Lost and comes after them, something like that. As it describes him, it's just like the description of the Fade that we enjoyed from the last episode. Hollow-cheeked, teeth bared, and a rictus snarl. He reached out with hands big enough to engulf a man's head.
Yeah, we got another rictus here. Hey, yeah, we got 2 rictuses here.
That classic rictus snarl.
Double rictus. What are the odds?
But what I don't get here is it says suddenly an agonized scream shivered in Rand's ears, and it seems like something happens to Mordred at this point, right? He's about to attack them, and then suddenly he screams an agonized scream, and then everyone else is just kind of like, what? What's going on? This is where I remember being confused about this even like 10 years ago or whatever, and now I'm confused again. I've written question marks around this because what caused Mordeth to stop attacking them? What caused him to scream? It's not in here. I don't get it.
Yeah, he huddles in a corner with his knees to his chest as far as he can. And I don't know what that means. I mean, they drop some of the stuff that they were holding.
And then he wails. Yeah, I'm really confused. Let's just real fast double click on the name Mordeth. If you can't tell somebody's evil if their name is Mordeth, you better be glamored.
And then they just get the fuck out of this chamber. They run the hell out of there.
Mordeth turns into smoke. He stretches out his finger and then stretches his whole body out after the finger, and then he disappears through cracks in the walls. You are all dead, which is creepy as hell.
They're like, let's get out of here. But Mat's like, but what about the jewels? They literally have to grab Mat and pull him out.
I think I have an answer to the scream question.
Yeah.
It's because Mat grabbed the dagger.
Oh.
Something about that dagger.
If you read that I just read it back, and the only thing that makes sense is that Mat grabbed that dagger out of the treasure trove, and then that caused Mordeth to scream and like become a ghost and, you know, seep into the walls.
I mean, this is getting a little bit ahead, but doesn't he want them to take the treasure? So maybe this is all an act for Mordeth. Like, oh, you got the treasure. I'm just gonna get my human self out of here now.
Maybe Mordeth is like 3 steps ahead, and he's like, well, if I act like I'm scared, then they'll take the treasure and they'll get out of here.
Yeah,
maybe.
They get the fuck out of that basement. They manage to find their way out somehow, which seems almost impossible because I imagine that Mordeth was the one responsible for what little torchlight they had.
Oh yeah, it says the first torch outside the room winked out, and then the next, and they have to kind of do the scary thing where you run along and the torches are all winking out. And then they sped upward shouting at the top of their lungs, which is just like really funny. Just 3 guys running up the stairs. They do the also classic cartoon move of busting out the doorway and then all just falling in a heap on top of each other.
Yeah, this whole scene though, and then they get out into the streets here, and there's eyes watching them everywhere, they feel like, or every shadow that they walk through makes them chilled and just full of fear, and like they're being hungered after. And this whole sequence of events here is like one of my more favorite, I think, moments so far in this book, where it's like very involved in kind of a horror and magical element that you don't understand, but it gives you just enough information to sort of be creeped out by and interested in the mystery of it all at the same time. You get the ancient city, the artifacts, the old ghost-like creature, and all of those things come together in a pretty fun way, I think.
I think I was just confused by whether or not these eyes were real or anything as I was reading this, because they also need to be very freaked out that they're being watched. And it keeps telling them the eyes are here and the eyes are there. That's a cool horror trope, being freaked out and thinking something's watching you. We've all been there. I think it just was like, okay, what is this? What is this real? Or what do they actually know? Or are they just scared? But then the way it all just cuts off as soon as they get close to Moiraine.
And then they get back to the group, and of course, as soon as they get back in, Nynaeve says, "You wool-headed witlings." Everyone is constantly calling each other wool-headed, which it's all right as an insult, but I feel like the Two Rivers folk need to learn some more worldly insults here.
Yeah, you need to learn words like asshole, dipshit, fucktard,
Listen up, dickweed.
ass bitch.
Dip ass. Yeah. What's one of my favorite insults?
Yeah, you dip ass.
Listen up, cock bitch.
Moiraine is just like stone faced. It says that the Aes Sedai's face betrayed no agitation at all, but her hands had loosed a white knuckled grip on her dress at the sight of them.
I like the way that Matt just like turns and blames this all on Moiraine. Like, hey, you said this was Hall and it was cool, so obviously we should just wander off by ourselves. Duh. If you didn't want us to wander off by ourselves, Moiraine, why would you say that this was Hall, an ally of Manetheren?
Exactly. Moiraine, it's all your fault. You didn't warn us like 10,000 times about everything, including just like saying or thinking about the Dark One. Surely we shouldn't be worried by now. They get questioned about if they saw Trollocs, no Trollocs. They're like, where the fuck is Lan? Lan's out looking for you, you stupid motherfuckers. And then basically they decide to take a nap until Lan comes back, see if they can actually finally squeeze some sleep in. And the answer to that is no, they cannot squeeze almost any sleep in.
But they should probably do a little dance before they go.
Probably, maybe a song or two.
We get one of our favorite descriptions here, which is a Tom snore. And this is soft for once. He's having a good sleep tonight. What we should all be concerned with is Tom's sleep apnea.
But this snore is like a kerchief settling upon a light cushion.
Like sawdust trickling slowly down.
Like a dandelion on a sheep's wool.
And then I like the description here of Rand's dream, which is brief and probably you can tell by if it's a long dream, then it's an important dream. And this is definitely a short one. But he's a little boy again, and he's got Tam's sword and a cradle strapped to his back, which is interesting. Running through empty streets, pursued by Mordred, who shouted that he only wanted his hand. And then there had been an old man who watched them and cackled with mad laughter the whole time. It's a weird one as well.
Before even the dream, there's this whole discussion of basically Moiraine explaining that Mordeth was a guy who came to the city way back in the day when it was called Hall, not Shadar Logoth, and he became the advisor of the king really quickly, and he was like, oh man, you should do bad stuff, not good stuff, and then things went bad in the city, but it doesn't really describe what happens except that even Trollocs were... At that point, they were like, no, we're not coming to this city.
Well, yeah, the Trollocs and the Fades attacked the city and they were all wiped out. And there's like this is kind of something like that doesn't really fit with the rest of the series in my memory, is that there's like a different kind of dark magic or like a curse upon something that like this area is cursed. And there's an evil spirit that lurks beneath it that influences, evil shit. And doesn't really work in the rest of the series. And it doesn't really make sense. And what Moiraine said is like, things do not have, like objects do not possess magic. The stones of a city do not possess magic. But in this case, they do. It's like a weird, like, kind of like, yeah, just a foul blight upon the world that something outside of the Dark One's taint, it doesn't adhere to his rules and it kills his minions. It's weird because they have a yin yang, it's all, yin and yang. It's like,
yeah, and it doesn't really explain it, but I think it's kind of hinting that there is a maybe like parable, almost biblical kind of storyline here where it says that Hall drew in on itself, hardened. It was said that some would rather see Trollocs come than the men of Hall. The victory of the light is all. That was the battle cry Mordeth gave them, and the men of Hall shouted it while their deeds abandoned the light. So, it's almost like, oh, well, they were sort of influenced to do these bad things in this city, and, that absence of the light, well, thinking that they had the light, how about those white cloaks? That was like what ended up, being their downfall and led to this darkness that sort of overcome the city. And like I said, I feel like that's very biblical, very Old Testament. And maybe that was just where Robert Jordan was drawing from there and never really decided to make that a big thing in the series from there on. And then from there, yeah, we sort of just close out the chapter that eventually Land shows up and he's like, oh, yeah, no, there's Trollocs in the city and that's crazy.
He has some Trolloc badges. I like that. He's always just like, some Trolloc badges here. Boom, throws them on the ground. Clearly he's killed those Trollocs.
These are the bad Trollocs.
Yeah, he says those are the worst ones or whatever. They learned that there was a ward around where they are that was holding back the forces of Eredhall, and then there's also a ward that Moraine says she can make if they can escape to the river that will keep the Trollocs away from them. Well, they can just build a raft. That seems kind of crazy to me. She just set up some wards and they can't come near them. And she's like, yeah, we'll take some time. We'll cut down some trees. We'll build a raft and we'll get across the river.
This plan seems real harebrained. I was like, what the build a raft? Are you kidding, Moraine? But all right.
But as we find out, that does not happen. And that's the end of that chapter. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Chapter 20, Dust on the Wind. The party makes their nighttime escape onto the dark streets of Shadar Logoth. After only a few minutes, the Emmons Fielders and Tom Maryland become separated from Moraine and Lan by the predatory fog incarnation of Mashadar, the evil entity that lurks underneath the city. Moraine instructs the group to follow the Red Star to the safety of the River Arenelle. As de facto leader, Rand leads the group back into Shadar Logoth, where they are quickly scattered into 6 different directions by the sudden appearance of Trollocs and a Fade. Rand is reunited with Mat after Mashadar feasts on the hapless Trollocs and a silently shrieking Fade. As they depart the city, Tom rides past them with another group of Trollocs on his heels. Perrin deliberately determines his path to safety and is greeted by Egwene as they ride through the city gates. Abruptly, they are given chase by a Trolloc scouting party, and Perrin unintentionally rides his horse off an embankment into the freezing Arenelle. As he struggles to swim across the river, we are unsure of Egwene's fate. Rand, Mat, and Tom reach the river, but the Trollocs are still in pursuit. The group chooses a direction at random and literally stumble upon a trader's ship bound for Whitebridge. After fighting off the Trolloc would-be pirates, the trio purchase passage to Whitebridge from the ship's captain, Bail Dumont, using Rand and Mat's silver coins of Tar Valon given to them by Moraine.
It is a pretty good chapter where we finally get some different point of views than Rand himself. We get Perrin and Egwene in this chapter.
Yeah, and Nynaeva's the next chapter. It even took me by surprise, and I had to read it back for a second and be like, wait, what? Not just our tall boy Rand, but our thick boy and our braid girl? Oh my God.
Like I said before, some of the just descriptive expository writing in this was pretty good. I love the opening line to this chapter. As they left the white stone building on their nervously shifting horses, the icy wind came in gusts, moaning across the rooftops, whipping cloaks like banners, driving thin clouds across the thin sliver of the moon. With a quiet command to stay close, Lan led off down the street. The horses danced and tugged at the reins, eager to be away.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good setting up of the scenes and getting that tension going where there's this, like we said before, sort of a lost smoke tentacle monster chasing after them. And then also the Trollocs, it's almost cartoony. They just run into a Trolloc and they're like, oh, and then the Trollocs are like, you guys are here too. Yeah, we're going to get you, but we're kind of afraid too.
Yeah, it's like the robbers are in the haunted house along with the Scooby-Doo gang, but they're all scared of the ghost too.
Yeah.
And I like how almost immediately they get separated from Moraine. Moraine's like, okay, come on together. And then a wisp of somehow Rand falls back and they don't even really just talk about why. And then suddenly there's a wisp of smoke between them. And then Moraine's like, no, she's just a strangled cry, which she doesn't have that kind of response very often.
Yeah. And she tells them, if the thing touches you, if those tentacles touch you, you die.
You did.
And I feel like we need a whole list. If they touch you, you die. If you look at them, you die.
If you think about the Dark One, you die.
I picture the fog tentacles having a big old nose that comes out and sniffs. That's food.
I'm actually surprised they didn't do that in the show. It's even more subtle in the show than this. It's just kind of a shadow that moves across everything and slowly comes towards them.
Yeah.
They didn't even get the tentacles from what I remember. I love this part when Egwene's like, "Can you kill it?" And Moiraine just laughs and she's like, "Yeah, no, you stupid girl. I cannot kill this."
Egwene, you fucking idiot.
And then, yeah, like we said, immediately they just get separated.
They're all going towards a star, a red star. Like she conveniently is like, oh, there's a red star that way. Go that way.
Yeah, it's like the version of Mars or Mercury or Venus or whatever, one of those planets you can see. And I love how, so it's like the group of kids and Tom Marilyn get separated from Lan and Moiraine. And immediately Rand's like, oh, well, nobody's doing anything. Nobody's moving. I guess I have to be the leader. And that lasts like 30 seconds. Rand is, he's talking to himself. You have to at least make them think you're not afraid. You're doing a good job, Woolhead. Get everyone out safely. And that immediately just falls apart.
Like as soon as they round the corner, there's, oops, a bunch of Trollocs, or no, a bunch of Trollocs there and a bunch of smoke cloud tendrils. And it's like, oh, okay, never mind, not the leader anymore. But then he's like, he tries to say this way as he gallops, and he looks back, and they're all going opposite directions.
On me!
Yeah.
They're all yelling that separately as they go off into their own directions.
Yeah.
It says the humans scattered like quail, which I guess I don't have a vision of quail scattering in my head from memory, but
Yeah.
sure.
My vision of quail having almost hit them on the road recently is that they're stupid and they just kind of like doink across the street like they are, having a good stroll in the park.
Yeah, so maybe they wouldn't have scattered. I don't know. Maybe Robert Jordan doesn't know quail like he thinks he does.
Well, no, I think they go bursting out of a bush, right? Like they go all off in different directions.
That's more of a pheasant thing.
I don't know what the difference between a quail and a pheasant is.
Have you not paid attention to birds lately?
No, I'm not. I'm a city boy.
That's part of getting older, is just noticing birds.
So this is where we get split up, and first it's Rand by himself. He's just like, oh no, where did everybody go? And he wanders around the streets, and like we said, he kind of has some cartoony interactions with some Trollocs. The Fade's trying to crack the Trollocs with its whip, and it says it's cracking over the heads with the Trollocs with a sound like a lightning bolt, popping sparks in the air, which I kind of like that. That was pretty cool. Apparently Fades have a whip to spur on their Trolloc armies that shoots out lightning bolts with sparks and everything.
But then the fog strikes. I really like this description here. Yeah. Which strikes like a viper's and just kind of like, eat like 2 tentacles per Trolloc, apparently.
Yeah, those Trollocs get fucked. And I like how Robert Jordan dared to say when Rand gets through this that stars spangled the sky. I don't know if you can't say stars spangled, especially if you're American.
Can you just say that?
It's copyright or eminent domain.
I thought about like, why would the fog not attack the group, when Moiraine and Lan were separated from the rest of them, but it kind of seemed weird that it kind of sprang into action when the Trollocs were coming down, but as evidenced by the mythology that Moiraine recited, that the fog already had a taste for Trollocs, and so it knew that scent.
Right. It has to like sniff them out.
Yeah.
And then Rand he's scared by this encounter with some Fades and Trollocs where the smoke's coming after both of them, and rides down the road, and he's like, oh shit, there's someone coming around the corner, and he just full on swings as hard as he can with his sword without even knowing what's there. And it's Mat. And it doesn't really directly describe it, but it sounds like it says only a desperate effort stopped the blade short. With a yelp, Mat tumbled back, half falling off his horse and nearly dropping his bow. So I'm assuming that that means either Rand like stopped at the last minute or Mat parried the blow barely, but he almost just fucking cuts Mat's head off.
I think Rand stopped it.
So Rand almost murders Mat, but then they get paired up, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna get out of the city. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, Tom Marilyn comes out and almost quotes Gandalf and says, ride, you fools.
And this is, again, another point where I just noted, like, There are horns blowing in this city, like as all these Trollocs are like, what are these horns doing? Are they trying to say like, if you hear a horn, you blow yours too, so we just know how many other bands are out there? Or are they like, we blow at a certain time just to scare people forward? I'm still just very confused at why the Trollocs keep blowing horns and what it means.
It's for the benefit of adding tension to the scene.
Yeah, of course.
The Trollocs always act in our benefit as readers. Then we get to Perrin's point of view.
A new character is unlocked. The black silhouette on the login screen now changes and it's Perrin.
A second player has joined. I loved Perrin's point of view immediately. First thing Perrin's doing when you start reading in his head is saying that everyone back in Emond's Field considered him slow of thought. And it was partially because he's big and blah, blah, blah. He's a big boy, and so he must be stupid. But he's just like, no, I prefer thinking things through. And he's really considering what's going on there. It's not that long reading in his point of view, but it's good. He has this sort of chase through the cities, very similar to Rand. I feel like he's much more like believing in the things that Moiraine has told him. He's like, I got to get to the river. He keeps calling her Moiraine Sedai. He's got like the full polite way of addressing her.
He's internalized that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's just going to make for the river as quick as he can and follow exactly what Moiraine told him. And then he runs into Egwene out there in the streets and they match up. Bella's okay, although by the end of this chapter, I'm like, is Bella okay?
We still don't have much resolution to that by the end of this chapter. At first she's like, Rand, is that you? And she's like, no, it's Perrin. And she's like, oh shit.
I guess that's cool. I guess I'll go with Perrin.
Yeah, better than a Trolloc, I guess.
They get out into the woods there, and it says that Egwene came, both of them booting their horses, heedless of the noise, heedless of the branches that slapped at them. That would be very potentially painful and like cut up your face, and that can knock you off your horse.
Again, they do this a lot, but there's a lot of like riding horses at full speed into places you shouldn't ride a horse at any speed really in the dark in woods. There's no path. Like you're just going to break your horse's ankles real fast.
And to be fair, it does not last long before Perrin is just over a ledge into the river. So
it's not even really a page. So I guess I am my concern has panned out. Suddenly his horse is screaming. Yeah, you're right. He's falling, tumbling out of the saddle. He had ridden right off the edge of a sheer bluff into the Arenal.
We'll get to it shortly, but when Rand arrives at that boat, there's a thing that happens where it says that Rand is thinking in his head like, my luck surely cannot keep lasting like this. And I like how that's at least an acknowledgement in the narrative that these things can't keep happening in the way that saves them.
The Rand just rides until he suddenly finds a boat just perfect for him, whereas Perrin rides until he falls off a cliff and falls in the river and almost dies.
Yeah, and it's freezing water in the night. Like, it does not take more than a minute or two of being in water like that before you can start to get hypothermia and get into some pretty rough territory.
He kicks off his cloak, but he still has the rest of his clothes and his axe on. And like, man, swimming fully dressed in cold, fast-moving water with an axe on your belt seems crazy. But he's a thick boy. Probably has a lot of natural buoyancy built up in his ass.
He's got blubber reserves.
He inflates his swim bladder, and he's just fine.
Perrin makes it down the river here, ways it sounds like, and basically we get told that he climbs up onto the edge of the river and finds shelter against the wind, and that's where it ends, and he hasn't found anybody after that. We don't know what happened to Egwene or poor Bella.
Oh, poor Bella. You better be okay, Bella, dear. He thinks he can hear Trollocs on the far side of the river, and then that's it. And then we're back to Rand.
Yep. We get them riding off into the woods somewhere also. And this is when we get the first mention of Tom actually doing something besides singing or telling a story. And he just busts out some knives. He like all of a sudden is separated from the group, and Rand's like, oh no, did he abandon us? And then Tom appears from behind the Trollocs that are chasing them, and he's got knives in his hands, and he just throws them into them, and he's like, damn, those are my second best knives.
Yeah, he gets 3. Like Matt also gets some blood here. He shoots one of the Trollocs in the eye as right before it's about to get Rand. Throwing knives from horseback, yeah, go for it, dude. But it's fantasy. But again, it doesn't seem like the best thing to do.
Forward, who knows where the wind's blowing? Hopefully it was in his favor. Yeah, they make their way towards where eventually along the riverside as they're riding up, they see that there is a torch lit and they're like, oh shit, that's a boat. Must be a trader. Let's just go for it. And this is where they just abandon their horses. Who knows what the fuck happens to them? Poor Cloud.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and then the Trollocs are right on their backs. So they get right onto this boat, and there's a guy like just barely waking up as they're shouting and getting on. And he's like, "What the fuck's what?" And that guy has some bad luck with the captain brought on by their arrival, as we'll see in a minute here. But
he gets jumped on by Rand, almost snatched by a Trolloc.
Yeah, and then fired immediately.
Rand does manage to swing at this Trolloc as it comes up the boat. People are freaking out and shouting and hacking mooring lines with axes. That's how you know when a boat's in a hurry, is it's the people cut the rope with an axe instead of doing their normal knot thing.
And this is where that line happens I was talking about, where Rand sees that his luck might be getting stretched pretty thin here as he's about to get killed again. And a big boom, I think that's like the sail probably on the boat.
It's like the wooden mast thing that hangs, that goes perpendicular to the mast that swings around. Many pirates get whacked with them in hook.
And then Gelb, this guy, gets yelled at by the captain that we meet here. Captain Doman shows up and he's like, you know what, Gelb, you're going to be fired. We're dropping you off the next port and let's get the fuck down the river. There's Trollocs here, and they seem to also know about Trollocs, like they've been having encounters with them recently. And then it gets into the scene where they go below decks into the captain's cabin, and he's like, well, you're on my ship now. What do we do? Tom tells him a story.
I also like the weird patois Captain Doman speaks. Why should I no throw you over the side for the trouble you've brought me? He doesn't say no, he always says not, and that's how you know he's from a different place.
I was imagining it was like an Irish, like we're doing fast talking, like that'd be a tale many folk would no believe. Of course, I did see the Trollocs, did I know? Something like that.
Okay, you know? Yeah, okay, that was different than I went for, but yeah, okay.
Choose your poison there and decide which kind of tropey voice you want.
Please write in to bridgeburnersbc@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter. How do you do the captain's voice? Let us know.
Either way, it was a pretty fun voice. And yeah, Tom tells a story about how they arrived there, and it's just like, boys, shut up and let me do the talking. And there were Trollocs, and these are my Gleeman apprentices or wannabe apprentices, and we're just heading down the river. Nothing weird. Don't worry about it. The captain doesn't really care that much, though, and he's like, so do you have money or what? And that's where Rand and Matt both foolishly pull out their entire fucking silver coin that we've learned is worth a horse, which is a lot. And they both give him it, and he gives them some change back, but it doesn't sound like that much. And later, Tom's like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
I could have got this for free. I know all the stories.
Yeah, and as we learn in the next chapter, that Moiraine is actually tracking the boys through these coins that she's given them. So it was like a even bigger mistake than they knew. And it's kind of a fun that it combines those two things at the same time, where it's like, okay, you learn that they give up these coins in a stupid way. And then also that in turn, without them knowing, screws up Moiraine tracking them. So it sort of explains why they are going to be split up for a while here, it sounds like. Okay. Oh, what's that? Oh. I'm being told by our producer that we have a sponsor. We have an ad. Let's go to that now.
Greetings, human. It's me, your buddy Mordeth, with a little message from the Shadar Logoth Board of Tourism. Since this wonderful pandemic that until so recently gripped your pathetic world has finally and regrettably abated, it's time to get out there, see the world, get a little tipsy, have a little fun. Come to Shadar Logoth. Mordeth, my friends say on social media, you always look so tan and relaxed. How is this so? The answer is simple, my friend. I have literally unlimited time to chill out in the world's premier vacation destination. Come to Shadar Logoth. Beaches? There are many beaches in Shadar Logoth. Nightclubs? Of course. Shadar Logoth has excellent nightclubs. Skiing? I do not know this word, but I assure you, there is much good skiing to be had in Shadar Logoth. Best of all, my friends, there is treasure. Come to Shadar Logoth. Take the treasure. Return to the edge of the city. This is a command. Like all humans, I, Mordeth, do enjoy a good time. Come, party with me in Shadar Logoth, and then, perhaps, I can come party with you.
Shadar Logoth does not accept responsibility for any harm that may occur when you visit Shadar Logoth. You will visit Shadar Logoth. Shadar Logoth is an equal opportunity destination. No passport is required to visit Shadar Logoth. You will visit Shadar Logoth. Wow, that sounded really relaxing. Let's get this finished up and get to that next chapter so I can go and book a flight.
Chapter 21. Listen to the Wind. Sunrise finds Nynaeve catching a few hours' sleep on the bank of the river Arenal, separated from the rest of the party. She considers the difficulty of proceeding alone, but without any other options or even a clear direction to travel, she decides to head downriver. Nynaeve eventually catches the smell of wood smoke and stealthily approaches a tiny camp. Moraine and Lan have also made it out of Shadar Logoth and are talking. Lan is confused and concerned at the number of Trollocs that they have faced. Moraine stays focused on the boys and reveals that one is across the river and that the other two are swiftly headed downstream, and that she needs them urgently. Nynaeve's hiding place is revealed, and Moraine surprises the Winsome by telling her that she can channel. She is able to predict key events from Nynaeve's past when the power was first revealed, and eventually convinces Nynaeve that she too must accompany them to Tarvala. They debate next steps, but Moraine carries the day, and they begin to travel downriver to Whitebridge after the two boys, and hoping that all in their group will follow.
Hell yeah, we get the Nynaeve chapter.
Took that braid, bitch!
For some reason, when I first read this, I did the entire first 3 pages thinking this was Egwene, and then it suddenly said Nynaeve. I'm like, oh, wait, no. Oh, I have to go read this all again because I'm picturing the wrong person in my head. As if her negative self-talk couldn't clue me into who I was listening to here.
I feel like I've sort of in a nitpicking way pointed out each of these, but we got another one of these sentences that should have probably been edited out from Robert Jordan. Her horse slept too, head down and legs spraddled in the manner of horses.
I actually like that line. So I'm just imagining, like, weird, they do that weird thing with their legs when they lay down.
The horse did it horsily.
The horse laid down much like a horse lays down.
It's not even that bad. I kind of almost like it too, but it's funny that it's because you understand what he's saying, like when he describes it that way. But when you get that sort of recursive, like, and it did a thing like that thing does, you probably want to avoid that.
She's ashamed of herself for having fallen asleep on this side of the river. She says, "Light preserve you, woman, if you can't stay awake one night." But you've been pretty tired. You shouldn't blame yourself too much.
Well, yeah, they were all up dancing like not that long ago and basically have slept maybe like a couple hours here and there since then. And they've just been going through trauma and battle and shadow creatures with tentacles chasing them through the streets. So probably need to sleep.
We get a little bit of a breakdown of her escaping with the city. It sounds basically like everyone else did, but she kind of clearly they're not after her as much as they're after the boys. They know the smell of what they want. She says to the horse, of course, as you do. And it's not me. Yeah,
she gets that memory where basically the only time she saw Trollocs outside the city, they just kind of pop out, they see her, they look at her for a minute, and they're like, oh, that's not the one we want. And she's almost disappointed.
We can smell her period blood. That's a woman.
And Nynaeve, like, she's basically the queen of projection, especially in these chapters where she's just constantly like, no, you're the bad one. You're the one that can use the true source, and it's not me. I definitely can't do that. And then she just admits it to herself by the end of it.
She mentally curses her skirts here. She's trying to track then along with to try to figure out where everyone is. She's seen lots of prints, but isn't able to figure out who it is. She thinks they're mostly Trollocs. But then, yeah, she definitely curses herself for wearing undivided skirts.
And it goes into this thing that we find out later, that the way that Nynaeve was really able to track down where the group of travelers was that she has a connection, which apparently whenever you heal somebody with the true source, it gives you a permanent, I think, connection to somebody.
Did you know that? Come on, Sean, catch up.
I think that's one of those elements in this book that does not carry on to the next.
Yeah, because there's some people that disappear later, if I were thinking that wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense.
I mean, although I'm sure if you really wanted to, if Robert Jordan bothered to, you could probably write easily like, oh, well, there's a reason why later that they couldn't track, she couldn't use that ability because she was blocked by this thing that happened, right? It could have been a simple writing around it, but probably doesn't even remember that he wrote that. And then she runs into Lan, or she kind of sees him, and Lan doesn't notice her, which I don't know. It seems like we're getting some looks at his ability to detect what's going on around him. Maybe it's because Nynaeve has good intentions, not bad, is why he can't notice her all the time. But Moiraine definitely notices her listening to them out in the woods there, and it's just like when Rand was listening to Egwene and Nynaeve, or Egwene and Moiraine talking back in the woods a couple chapters back.
Where she can snap her head around and just like, I see you listening to me, little boy. And I think she kind of lets drop in this conversation, though, like how important the boys are to her. Like nothing else matters other than like keeping track of them, which I think is an interesting thing to have dropped. And she's like, yeah, what plots have you meshed Egwene and the boys in when she finally does come out? What filthy Aes Sedai plots are you planning to use them in? She definitely doesn't like that shit.
She says the whole world will be overrun in 5 if we do not find those boys. 5 years, that is. And she also mentions the ways with capital the ways, and she says that the ways are closed and there's not been an Aes Sedai powerful enough to travel since the time of madness, which whatever the time of madness is, that sounds like a crazy time. I don't know about that. And
yeah, well, everyone was on DMT.
That was the disco era.
Oh, well, like the way that she addresses Nynaeve in here. So when Nynaeve comes out from around the tree. So what did I sense, Nynaeve Elmira? Wisdom of Evansfield, and an unknowing wielder of the one power. Like, who talks like that and gives somebody a weird title like that in the middle of a sentence? But Nynaeve is just like, oh, no, I don't channel. I'm not a channeler. I'm not an unwitting channeler. You don't know anything about me.
She's kind of conciliatory towards Nynaeve when they have this discussion here. She's like, oh, well, I guess those herbs help me, and you do have some good things to offer the group, or offer me even as a all-powerful Aes Sedai, which is really just, I think she's just kind of telling Nynaeve what she wants to hear.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Well, I think yes, but she is also pretty clear that it becomes pretty clear that like Nynaeve's, or Moraine's known from the beginning that Nynaeve has had power. She's never really been that hostile to her. Most of the hostility has been the 100% in the other direction.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds like she's subtly like telling her like, well, maybe not all of those things you did with herbs are what you really did.
Exactly. Yeah. She butters her up, but also kind of takes her down a peg in a weird way. Like, I know you're the most talented wisdom that everyone's seen, the youngest wisdom you've ever anyone's seen. And it's because you have the same magic power that I do.
She sort of gives this like basically play by play of like, oh, so, I bet when you were a kid, you had this moment where you were able to do something crazy that you didn't expect to be able to do. And it just kind of happened. And then you probably felt kind of weird afterwards for a few days. And there is a description of that where she healed Egwene when she had, what is it called? Bone breaking fever or something?
Bone breaking fever, which like the way this is described seems just gnarly, that like a kid would get this thing and it looks like they're twisting so bad that their bones are going to break. Like, ew, God. And
apparently it was just completely avoided by Nynaeve, like healing Egwene before it really had a chance to do anything.
And it's funny because it just like, it's pretty clear from the way it's described here that like Egwene would have gotten better by herself in a couple of days, but it was just Nynaeve couldn't like bear the sight of her being in so much pain that caused her to do it. And thinking, oh, she actually is going to die. There's no way she can live through this.
She's very much put on this responsibility to herself of being the wisdom and having to heal everyone in the village. And if she screws up, it's all on her. And she's like, with healing Egwene like that, it's just like, something horrible like that's going to happen to somebody, she just is ready to fucking commit seppuku or whatever, seppuku, to deal with whatever the consequences of it are. She seems like she's right on the edge of a breakdown if something really awful happens.
So that's what kind of convinces her maybe that Moiraine is correct here. And like, oh, the Aes Sedai chose a good example. The filthy dark friend Aes Sedai, which I'm like, geez, girl.
Yeah, she says that like twice.
But then Moiraine is like, hey, man, you were lucky you could have just died, which is what happens to most people. And then it gets into like that kind of darker discussion of like, no, girls who touch this and don't control it often just die. And then she's like, oh, yeah, there were some other girls that just died. Huh, I hadn't even thought about that.
I almost wish that was brought up earlier, because it kind of adds an edge to the danger of the magic in general and channeling, whether it's male or female, that it sort of solidifies that idea that it makes more sense that Moiraine is going around trying to get these kids to go with her, because just left to their own devices, they could just die. It seems like those consequences probably would have been better off emphasized to them earlier on, so that they're not constantly being like, oh, what does this lady want with us? Is she kidnapping us? What's going on here? What is her real intention?
Yeah, it seems like if the Aes Sedai were really interested in like a better system for like getting kids, and if this was like a real thing in the real world, you would just go and tell their parents like, hey, I'm really sorry, your kid has this weird thing that's going to kill them unless we train them, let them come with us, and not like, you know, sneak around doing weird kidnappings and telling strange stories and stuff. Yeah,
I don't actually remember if this is addressed later in the series, but I don't think it is. I think it's one of the half dozen like elements in this book that is not brought up again, but it's not that relevant going forward.
Yeah. Hey, it's in the first book. I'm going to take it as canon, and I'm going to bring it up every time things come up in later books that it's applicable to, and I'll hold Robert Jordan's dead feet to the fire. I'm going to make him responsible for what he wrote in this first book, okay? And then she sort of gets this point where she's like, well, I can't have the true power. Okay, guess I do have the true power. I'll admit it to myself a little bit.
She's like, you made this all up. And Moraine's like, no, I didn't. She's like, no, you didn't. So at this point, she kind of accepts it. She kind of says, you have to come with me. But then the Lan goes off to find her horse, and there's this whole little thing going on in the background where she's like, "Ooh, I hope he doesn't find my horse. No, I hope he doesn't. Oh, he does find my horse."
Oh, and he totally finds her horse immediately, if you know what I mean.
He finds her horse real fast. Really, this is a tactical discussion again about what's happening next. And you got 5 people missing. You know where 3 of them are, and you're just going to follow 2 of them and hope everybody else catches up. But I guess that's kind of the best way to do it. The river's only flowing one way. You got to get to where you're going.
It's kind of funny, though, that the conclusion that she comes to from all this is like, oh, well, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the best course of action is to just continue downriver towards Whitebridge. And that's like, okay, that's like the conclusion you would have come to without any of these coins or anything, probably.
Just go the way the river flows. Yeah.
Where you told them to go.
I mean, I do like just the very end. It kind of just gets into Nynaeve's head where she's like, wait, I have to choose? They sent me to rescue these kids, but now I have to choose which kids I have to rescue. How fucking dare you make me choose? And it's kind of like a funny thing. Like, you know, we don't like having to make hard decisions in our lives. And even when we're thinking we're so cool and heroic, the second we get confronted by like, hey, here's a choice between 2 equally bad alternatives, we're like, oh, no, that sucks. It's a very human nature thing to do, I think.
Yeah, and she doesn't know what to do, and she's blinking back tears, and she thinks, light, a wisdom is supposed to look after all of her people. Why do I have to choose like this?
Wait, so there's never like a point where there's 2 people sick in town and you have to make a hard call? Like, really?
Yeah, and continuing that projection, she sees Lan, and he sees that she's crying when he comes back, or about to cry, and his eyes widen when he sees her, and she thinks, how dare he mock my crying? And it's like, he widened his eyes when he saw you were crying, like...
He just looked at you. Yeah. But I mean, also, like, when you're in I've been there, or you're just pissed off or whatever, and somebody just looking at you like, shut up.
Yeah, sure. It's not exactly one of those ironic, funny endings to the chapter, but it does say, the Aes Sedai was so confident in her power and plans, she thought, but if they did not find Egwene and the boys, all of them, alive and unharmed, not all of her power would protect her. Not all her power. I can use it, woman. You told me so yourself. I can use it against you. Okay. Getting a little ahead of yourself.
Dun, dun, dun. I know. The real enemy here is Moraine.
I'm so sure you can take down the Aes Sedai just because you've discovered and sort of half admitted to yourself that you might be able to channel. But, you know, I guess that leads maybe to a future where you could see Nynaeve, depending on what happens, being driven to learn to use the true source just
to kind of get back at Moraine and kind of get back to where she was. I mean, she's definitely coming at it from a very different angle than anyone else, I think.
That could be fun to see.
Yep, I agree.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Bridgeburners Book Club. We would love it if you follow us on Instagram at Bridgeburners Book Club, on Twitter at BridgeburnersBC, and find us on YouTube at Bridgeburners Book Club, where we will be posting full episodes, clips, and polls going forward. If you would like to write in, shoot us an email at bridgeburnersbc@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or contentions, and maybe we'll read them on air. You can also join our Discord with the link in the episode description for discussions, questions, or to post your best memes. It really helps if you give us a rating on Apple and Google Podcasts, so please consider helping the show to grow. I'm the Sean Chan, and for my co-hosts, Ben Bowie and Tyler the Creator, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.